What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to our Bible study. Okay, so we are looking at Numbers chapter 21, which, for a little bit of context at least, so the Israelites are wandering through the wilderness because they weren't trusting enough to go into the promised land the first time they came around to it. They thought the people were too big and strong for God to actually, give them victory or whatever. So in the midst of that wandering in the wilderness, they, in the last chapter, I think, found themselves kind of at the edge of a certain kingdom belonging to the Edomites. They wanted to try and kind of cut through there, but the king of the Edomites said, no, we won't let you. So they were kind of sort of forced to go around, which might have something to do with the situation they get into in this chapter. But we'll go ahead and get to some reading here and see what that is first. So, here we go. Numbers chapter 21. The Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev, heard that the Israelites were approaching on the road through Atharim. So he attacked the Israelites and took some of them as prisoners. Then the people of Israel made this vow to the Lord: if you will hand these people over to us, we will completely destroy all their towns. The Lord heard the Israelites' request and gave them victory over the Canaanites. The Israelites completely destroyed them and their towns, and the place has been called Hormah ever since. Okay, so why would God be in favor of these towns being completely destroyed? Well, number one, these people, actively fought against God's chosen people, the Israelites. So, there's that. Also, I don't know for sure if it was said yet, but definitely in and around this time frame, God makes it clear that, he wants complete destruction, essentially, of, their opponents. Because otherwise, the Israelites might start trying to take an easy way out. They might start taking some of the people as, spouses, or treating them like friends when they really kind of aren't. And eventually kind of letting them integrate into their culture and start adopting some of their practices and things like that. And that's not something that God wants for his people. So so that's why, making it clear to God that they would utterly destroy these Canaanites and their cities, that's why that really has anything to do with it. That's why, to my understanding, why God would want and even maybe kind of encourage the, utter destruction of these people. Now, it's not made 100% clear that they actually, it just says they'll completely destroy all the towns, not necessarily, eliminate all of the people. So I might have misspoke there a little bit. But let me look at the footnote here at destroy. So the Hebrew term used here refers to the corporate, the complete consecration of things or people to the Lord, either by destroying them or by giving them as an offering. So it was, at the very least, a sign of loyalty and, basically saying, okay, we're gonna get rid of this thing, I mean, I would assume it's, when it says destroy, like, giving things as an offering most of the time meant, like, sacrificing them. But I guess there were some offerings that were just, like, handed over without sacrificing / destroying. So I guess when it says destroy there, it doesn't necessarily mean that, everything was outright physically, destroyed, removed, depleted, whatever. It may have been, at least to some effect, that some of the towns were then dedicated to God in some sort of way. Also, real quick, footnote, they're just saying that Hormah means destruction, presumably in Hebrew. Which, yeah, very literal name because of the destruction of the... Anyway. Okay. So then we'll move along to verse 4. Then the people of Israel set out from Mount Hor, taking the road to the Red Sea, to go around the land of Edom. But the people grew impatient with the long journey, and they began to speak against God and Moses. "Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die here in the wilderness?" they complained. "There is nothing to eat here and nothing to drink, and we hate this horrible manna." Again, like, okay, now I will grant that eating the same thing every day, every meal, for as long as they have, would be quite annoying. But like they've made these complaints before. This is kind of nothing new. And I wonder how many of these people that are doing the complaining are the same ones that refused to trust God to give them victory, when they first scouted and were thinking about going into the promised land. So it might just be, the same kind of stubborn mentality that's, that has them more worried on being self-sufficient and or, focus more on themselves and their ability to do or not do these things than, focus on God's ability to provide. Footnote there at Red Sea, the Hebrew just says Sea of Reeds, which is kind of another way of referring to what is now known as the Red Sea. So, yeah, again, they had to go around the land of Edom, as mentioned in the previous chapter, which made the journey take longer. Anyway, verse 6. "So the Lord sent poisonous snakes among the people, and many were bitten and died. Then the people came to Moses and cried out, 'We have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Pray that the Lord will take away the snakes.' So Moses prayed for the people. Then the Lord told him, 'Make a replica of a poisonous snake and attach it to a pole. All who are bitten will live if they simply look at it.' So Moses made a snake out of bronze and attached it to a pole. Then anyone who was bitten by a snake could look at the bronze snake and be healed." Yeah, so I'm noticing there's a lot of, like, kind of symbolism / poetic, almost symmetry of a sort to some of the punishments and, like, blessings, even in a way that God provides. I mean, you might call it poetic justice that the people were complaining about, dying out in the wilderness, and God's like, okay, well, here are some snakes. They there's your death for you if you really think that's such a bad thing. Let's see what you do when you're actually, facing death head on. And then they, said they were sorry, asked for, deliverance from the snakes. And then the thing that helps save them is an image of a snake, or more accurately, a sculpture of a snake out of bronze. But again, they're looking at something that God directly said to make to help save them. So in a way, they're kind of looking at God's handiwork and trusting that to save them. Okay, moving on to verse 10. The Israelites traveled next to Oboth and camped there. Then they went to Abarim. I'm assuming that's an I there. Anyway, went on to Abarim in the wilderness on the eastern border of Moab. From there they traveled to the valley of Zered Brook and set up camp. Then they moved out and camped on the far side of the Arnon River, in the wilderness adjacent to the territory of the Amorites. The Arnon is the boundary line between the Moabites and the Amorites. For this reason, the book of the Wars of the Lord speaks of the town of Waheb in the area of Suphah and the ravines of the Arnon River, and the ravines that extend as far as the settlement of Ar on the border of Moab. Okay, that makes me really curious. Like, what is this book of the Wars of the Lord? Because that's not something that's making a reference to, like, another book of the Bible or anything like that. I don't think. Like, later on, we kind of end up seeing through, Kings and Chronicles and things like that, that they'll kind of cross-reference each other, where one might say, and there's more about this in the book of the, Chronicles of whatever, and Chronicles might say, yeah, you can hear more about this king in the book of the Kings, and that kind of thing. But this, I don't even remember reading this in any other version where it mentions Book of the Wars of the Lord. But anyway, so they traveled around a fair bit, and I guess they got to the border of Moab, kind of like right between the territory of the Moabites and Amorites, so it seems. Anyway. Okay, then we get to verse 16. From there the Israelites traveled to Beer, which is the well where the Lord said to Moses, "Assemble the people, and I will give them water." There the Israelites sang this song. "Spring up, O well. Yes, sing its praises. Sing of this well which princes dug, which great leaders hollowed out with their scepters and staffs." Then the Israelites left the wilderness and proceeded on through Matana, Nahaliel, and Bamoth. After that, they went to the valley in Moab where Pisgah Peak overlooks the wasteland. Okay. I'm trying my best with all these names of places and whatnot. So they encountered a certain well, which, they had been complaining about having nothing to drink, so understandable that they were, kind of happy to see a source of water, especially one that was most likely drinkable. Beer means well, unsurprising. And I think that something to that effect was mentioned, when previous place names were explained. Like Beersheba, I think, was, the well of whatever Sheba actually meant. I don't recall that off the top of my head. So rather, for this footnote here, it mentions, I guess the original Hebrew might say it overlooks Jeshimon. So more traveling around. They found a well. It says then they left the wilderness, which it probably just means that like the type of land that they started traveling through wasn't quite as barren anymore, which would make sense if they had just kind of passed a well. I mean, wilderness wasn't necessarily like straight up desert. It could have kind of been, but it's possibly more equivalent to like, African savanna or something like that. Like there may very well be grass and, some things like that. But the point of calling it a wilderness is basically to indicate that it was sparse. So anyway. Okay, after that traveling around, then we get to verse 21. The Israelites sent ambassadors to King Sihon of the Amorites with this message. Let us travel through your land. We will be careful not to go through your fields and vineyards. We won't even drink water from your wells. We will stay on the king's road until we have passed through your territory. Sounds awfully familiar. Pretty much exactly what they said, to the king of the Edomites. Let's see if they get any better result this time. Verse 23. But King Sihon refused to let them cross his territory. Instead, he mobilized his entire army and attacked Israel in the wilderness, engaging them in battle at Jahaz. But the Israelites slaughtered them with their swords and occupied their land from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River. They went as far as the Ammonite border because the boundary of the Ammonites was fortified. Footnote there at fortified. It says, or because the terrain of the Ammonite frontier was rugged. Hebrew reads, because the boundary of the Ammonites was strong. Point being, the boundary would have been kind of hard to just cross over. So, Sihon, similar to the Edomite king, decides to bring out an army against the Israelites. But the Israelites fight back and successfully not only defend themselves, but basically kill off the army. So then, at that point, they're able to take control of the Amorite territory. Okay. So then we get to verse 25. So Israel captured all the towns of the Amorites and settled in them, including the city of Heshbon and its surrounding villages. Heshbon had been the capital of King Sihon of the Amorites. He had defeated a former Moabite king and seized all his land as far as the Arnon River. Therefore, the ancient poets wrote this about him. Come to Heshbon and let it be rebuilt. Let the city of Sihon be restored. A fire flamed forth from Heshbon, a blaze from the city of Sihon. It burned the city of Ar in Moab. It destroyed the rulers of the Arnon heights. What sorrow awaits you, O people of Moab? You are finished, O worshippers of Shamash. Shamash has left his sons as refugees, his daughters as captives of Sihon, the Amorite king. We have utterly destroyed them from Heshbon to Dibon. We have completely wiped them out as far away as Nophah and Medeba. So that little thing was just trying to, talk about how great, meaning like powerful, that Sihon was supposed to be. The fact that he was able to take this land from some of the Moabites. But then he loses to the Israelites. So, maybe not that great after all. Certainly not great enough that God can't handle it. Yeah, then we get to verse 31. So the people of Israel occupied the territory of the Amorites. After Moses sent men to explore the Jazer area, they captured all the towns in the region and drove out the Amorites who lived there. Then they turned and marched up the road to Bashan, or Bashan, I don't know. But King Og of Bashan and all his people attacked them at Edrei. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Do not be afraid of him, for I have handed him over to you, along with his people and his land. Do the same to him as you did to King Sihon of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon." And Israel killed King Og, his sons, and all his subjects. Not a single survivor remained. Then Israel occupied their land. So now we've gotten, let's see here. So now we've chronicled victory over the Amorites, and then King Og. Still not outright stated which particular people group per se that this was against, but the Israelites have now basically taken control of two territories ruled by two different kings. So, maybe there's a little bit more to this whole wilderness wandering thing than just, y'all were too scared to enter the promised land. So anyway, yeah, I guess that about does it for, chapter 21. Okay, so I feel like I do need to correct a little bit of something I said. The Israelites actually achieved victory 3 times within this chapter over Arad, Sihon, and Og. It didn't necessarily say that they took over the land that Arad had ruled, though, because that they devoted to destruction or whatever. But still, 3 victories and at least 1, possibly 2 different territories now taken over. This seems like a whole lot more than just wandering in the wilderness now. But anyway, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description to get info on other social media pages and all that good stuff. And leave comments below there with any thoughts you have. So that's it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.